Sean Diddy Combs was convicted on 2 federal charges, each carrying up to 10 years in prison. But now, in a twist maybe no one saw coming, reports say President Donald Trump's team has been in talks with Diddy's lawyers about a possible presidential pardon. Could Trump really set Diddy free? Is this justice, politics, maybe payback?
That courthouse, it didn't just feel important, it felt heavy. Like the whole world had stopped to watch. You could see it on people's faces. You could feel it in the air. Crowds swarmed the steps, barely holding back their emotions. Reporters shoved past each other, hunting for the best angle. And cameras clicked nonstop, like a warning something was coming. This wasn't just another day. This was the kind of moment history remembers.
After this whole criminal trial, 7 weeks of testimony and a verdict that ended in Sean Diddy Combs' conviction on 2 federal sex crimes charges, could he be pardoned by the President of the United States? You know, that is a question that came up a lot when we were doing the live streams of the Diddy trial every day on YouTube. I never really considered it as a real possibility, but I'll tell you what, now, based on current reporting, we may have to take this seriously. Oh, and in terms of relief for Diddy, we also have to get into his defense team's new memo that they filed arguing that his conviction should be thrown out, or at the very least, he should get a new trial. We're going to talk about that too. And by the way, let me tell you, we have an amazing guest who I'm going to be bringing on in a little bit, somebody who actually helped secure federal pardons for his clients, including from President Trump, and is an expert in criminal law, has been following this case from the very beginning. I'm going to bring him on in a little bit. But why do I say that we have to take pardons seriously now? Why? Well, TMZ has reported that President Donald Trump's administration has been talking to Diddy's legal team about a potential pardon, a forgiveness for a federal crime. It's enshrined in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment.
Walking in, you could feel it, the tension, the silence. Even the floor sounded nervous. Papers shuffled, shoes slid, and voices stayed low. The smell of strong coffee mixed with the clean, woody scent of the benches. Somewhere, a clock ticked loud and steady, like it knew something was coming. Diddy was already sitting there, calm on the outside, but you could see the cracks. His suit was clean, sharp, everything in place. But his face was somewhere else, eyes locked on the judge's bench, like he was trying to read the future. Every now and then, his jaw would tighten. A flicker near his temple said more than words ever could. His lawyers whispered beside him, drowning in papers and pressure.
Just had other random accounts like America First. What? He's actually considering this? Diddy is a depraved, abusive, sexual deviant who should be spending the rest of his life in prison. If Trump pardons him, he will get absolutely crushed. Who is advising him lately? It's looking like straight up sabotage at this point. There were other accounts that were not in favor of it, although there was this account. Milo posted on X, Trump has no choice but to pardon Diddy after the government, led by James Comey's daughter Maureen, simply lost interest in Diddy's guilt the moment they secured his tapes incriminating powerful Democrats. The prosecution was a shambles. The trial was a farce. Now, I want to talk about if this is really going to happen, how it would happen. Also, if it really depends on bail and sentencing, then what are we talking about? And I have somebody who not only has been following the Diddy case from the very beginning, not only is a renowned criminal defense attorney, but actually has obtained federal pardons from the president, including from Donald Trump. By the way, for his clients Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, those were maybe the most notable. I'm joined by Bradford Cohen. Bradford, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Now, before I even get into the pardon, okay, there was a bit of breaking news before we were going to come on. This is what I want to get your opinion on first. So Combs' defense team filed a memo in support of a motion for judgment of acquittal, or in the alternative, a motion for a new trial. And basically, I know you read through it, but basically the evidence, they would say, is insufficient to sustain that conviction. Their main arguments is really echoing what we've talked about a little bit when it came to the bail analysis, but that his prosecution, his conviction on these Mann Act prostitution charges is so unique. He wasn't profiting off of this business. All consenting adults were involved. The jury didn't find that there was any sex trafficking. They argued this isn't even prostitution per se, it's voyeurism, that the intent wasn't for people to travel for sex for money, but he paid them for their time. Everybody was having a good time. He makes a First Amendment argument that the freak-offs and the hotel nights were performances that were typically videotaped so they could watch them later on. It's just amateur pornography. And then finally makes the argument that he was prejudiced because of all the other evidence that came in to prove RICO or sex trafficking, and would have never came in if he was merely being prosecuted for prostitution, particularly the Intercontinental Hotel footage of him purporting to beat up Cassie Ventura Fine. And he says, at the very least, he needs a new trial. I hand it over to you. You think this is a successful argument?
Thank you. I don't know if it's going to be successful in the judgment of acquittal. I think the argument is interesting because everyone agrees he might be the only person in custody right now that has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. The Mann Act, and it gives a nice history of the Mann Act, and a lot of people don't understand what the Mann Act is, but the Mann Act was enacted because of a racist motivation that white women were being recruited by people of color to go across state lines and make money. So actually pimping those women across state lines and making money off of their sexual exploits.
Across from Diddy, the prosecutors sat cold and ready, shoulders stiff, eyes focused, their folders lined up like bullets, waiting for the signal. The air between both sides was alive, full of tension, full of heat. The gallery packed out quick. Big names, family members, and regular folks who stood in line just to see the storm unfold. No empty chairs left. People in the back stretched their necks for a peek. Then, silence. The bailiff's voice sliced through it. All rise. That side door opened, and in walked the judge. Calm, slow, deadly serious. Robe swaying, eyes scanning every corner. Then, boom, one crack of the gavel. Just like that, the room froze. People sat. The sound of wooden benches creaked like bones. The clerk leaned forward to begin.
The defense's argument. Was the defense's argument, hey, all the people who testified against Sean Combs were not being truthful, or were taking their accounts, were listening to their accounts, and what they're saying just didn't amount to a federal crime? Is it a mixture of both? Just trying to understand what the argument was.
I mean, I think it was a mixture. It depended on the witness, and a lot of the witnesses were telling the truth, but the truth didn't hurt Sean. It helped him. There were some people who were shading the truth. The great thing about it was there was a ton of evidence in written communications that people had created at the time, all these text messages. There were videos, and that really helped us expose the truth because these were things that had been recorded this is what people were, the girlfriends, others were saying to Sean at the time of the events in question. And so, there was really no way for the witnesses or the government to hide what was in the written documents.
Now, I will tell you, if you had been following what we've been doing here on Sidebar, Law and Crime, we call balls and strikes. So there were, during the course of the trial, we would say, this was the strength of the prosecution, this was the strength of the defense. There was such effective cross-examination of these key witnesses that we all kind of wondered, was the defense going to call any witnesses? And you really did. And what was that decision? Because I understand there were witnesses who were planning to be called. There was an idea to put forward a defense case. There was a choice not to do that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that strategy was about?
Sure. I mean, you always have to be ready to put on a case. At the end of the day, what it comes down to at the end of the government's case is how well do you feel it went in for us? And it's always risky to put on a defense case. People don't realize that, but there's always two sides to everything. And if you put on a witness, and even if it's, 70% good, if the prosecution scores some points, it can really undermine you. And so if you feel like the government's case has gone in really well for you, it can be actually riskier to call any witnesses. People don't necessarily realize that, but at the end of the day, we just made a decision that we thought the case had come in well, and we didn't want to, sort of change the dynamic in a way that could be risky for us.
Was Christina Coram ever potentially going to be called by the defense? We were all shocked why the government never chose to call her, since, her name came up almost every single day through almost every witness. Was there a plan by the defense to call her?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into specific plans or non-plans, but it was more of an overall decision just not to put anyone on and just to use a few pieces of evidence that hadn't come in.
What do you think about the prosecution's choice not to call her? Because I will tell you, we did lunchtime shows, live shows with our audience. I would say 80% of the questions that we got during 7 weeks of testimony was, why is she not being called and will she be called? Were you surprised the prosecution chose not to call who was supposed to be the main alleged co-conspirator?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that she would have been a double-edged sword for them, and they probably didn't want to take the risk. As you saw during the trial, even a number of the witnesses that they had always planned to call, that they did put in, kind of blew up in their faces or had positive things to say about Sean that maybe they weren't anticipating. And so it would have been pretty risky for them to put Christina Quorum on the stand, I think.
Charge after charge dropped like bricks. Felony, aggravated this, fraud, conspiracy. Each word landed hard. You could feel it in your chest. The list just kept going, longer than anyone expected. And when it finally stopped, the energy in the room had shifted. Even the people watching from the gallery were squirming. It was that heavy, that real. But the man in the middle, still, like stone. Only thing moving was his jaw, tight, locked. The judge leaned forward, both hands planted. A pause followed, and it hung there, cutting through the air. Then the words came.
Package. And you didn't tell me if it was unique. $50 million, right?
Yes.
You know, the idea of private security. It was an interesting argument because who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in his similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought it on our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to really be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Marc reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
The room froze. Nobody blinked. Pens hung in the air. Cameras zoomed in like snipers, and then it dropped. Guilty as charged. You could feel the shift, like the whole room took a hit. It wasn't a surprise, but still, it hit different when said out loud. A few gasps slipped out. Most just stared straight ahead, hiding their reactions. But the real moment, the one everyone waited for, was coming. The judge didn't flinch. Given the seriousness of the crimes, this court sentences you to And the number that followed, it was like the air disappeared. Whispers swept across the gallery. Eyes popped. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. Diddy? He sat still.
For enrolling in the program and for the efforts he made prior to finding himself in federal court facing all of those charges. So I think it does go to his credit, but you're right. Critics and skeptics, sometimes they'll just never be satisfied. And for, well-founded reasons. When you have someone who has a documented history, such as him, and you see the videos and you hear the testimony, his problem goes deeper than a 30-day, program. Not that these programs are 30 days, but just to say it's going to take long-term and commitment to the long-term results in order for us to really have confidence that he's not going to engage in such disturbing behavior.
And it's interesting too, because I think the public reaction to this verdict was really kind of split down the middle. I was really thinking it was gonna be one way. I was at the courthouse. It was a completely different kind of beast and animal that was going on after the verdict happened. There were people with the baby oil. It was a crazy day after the verdict happened. But I know some analysts were kind of comparing it to the O.J. Simpson verdict, but it seemed like the reaction was really kind of split down the middle. A lot of people upset with the jury's decision, but then there were a lot surprisingly celebrating the verdict. What are your thoughts?
Well, my entire time looking at the case, the charges, and listening, to the evidence as it came in during trial, I thought that depending upon how a person, be it a juror, be it the public, comes into the trial believing how someone who's a victim should act and how they believe relationships can evolve or devolve and fall apart is the lens that they would then make their verdict. Why I say that is because if you think a person who's battered, someone who's been a victim, someone who's been assaulted in the ways that were described, most people have an idea as to how they will respond and act towards that, or their expectation if it happened to their loved one, how they'd expect their loved one to act. And in those situations, you don't expect someone to be tweeting, you don't expect somebody to be sending texts telling their abuser that they love them or that they want more of what took place. However, there are other people who see it from maybe more so the lens of a victim or someone who's been abused, who would say, what? That's not so beyond the pale of reason, because the abuse has been so entrenched in this person's mind that they then fall in love with their abuser. And so that's not something that they would, look askance upon or look down upon. So, one of the things about being in trial that I always remind my clients, is that despite all the rules that the judge gives people, no one leaves their life experience or their opinions at the courthouse door. It all makes its way into the courtroom and ultimately into the jury room. And that's why you can see such people who are on one side, like celebrating Diddy being acquitted on the much more serious charges, and other people who are like, how did this happen? I am upset. I feel like victims did not get justice today.
The silence said it all. His lawyer leaned in, tried to calm him, hand on his arm, but Diddy yanked away. His voice cracked, loud and raw. You can't do this to me. The judge started to respond, but Diddy cut him off. You don't know the truth. This is wrong. His palm hit the table hard. The sound echoed. A pen rolled off and smacked the ground. The gallery lit up. Whispers everywhere. People leaning forward, trading looks, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. You're destroying my life, he shouted. Everything I built. Bailiffs stepped in, slow and steady, one on each side. But Diddy's voice only grew sharper. You think you know what happened? You don't. You've been fed lies. The judge slammed the gavel again and again. Order in the court. But it didn't matter. The emotion had already spilled over, and it was too late to pull it back.
Getting along. Federal juries tend to be, in California anyway, we have they draw our state juries off the DMV database. That's how you get jury duty, is from the DMV. Federally, it's based on voter rules. So it's people who are conscientious enough to actually vote, and you tend to get a more serious class of juror in federal court, which I think is interesting. So to answer your question, it's something that we could kick around for years.
Sure.
But I think the fundamental problem here is that it was always kind of a misfit for a RICO theory. Just like the sex trafficking, sex trafficking requires fraud, force, or coercion, right? So that essentially is the same elements of rape. So you essentially, it's transporting somebody under circumstances that equate to rape. Is something forceful, something fearful. That it just doesn't fit very well here, especially when you're talking about all these people who they're orbiting him. They're all trying to advance their own career. And when the defense attorney got up and said, Cassie got $30 million as a result of her settlement, right? And that was a big move.
Yeah, I wasn't sold for that personally, because I was like, the prosecution came back and be like, she already settled. What's her incentive to come here and lie? What's her incentive to be a part of this? And that for me, but I think the messages, the conduct that arguably contradicts someone being a victim, and I know there's complicated factors between an abuser and a victim, the trauma, I get it. I totally understand it, but I wonder if that's what saddled the jury. Okay, I want to move past the verdict because now we have to talk about what's happening next. First thing, when the sentencing hearing is going to happen. So they have this hearing next week about whether to expedite the sentencing, happening before October 3rd. If both sides agree, great. If they don't, what is a compelling legal argument for the defense to say, we want this sentencing to happen much sooner?
Well, I mean, we know that behind the scenes, what they want, of course, is they expect a chance that he's going to be released. So that's their big motivating factor, of course. Whether the court abides by that, I mean, it is a substantial change in circumstance. He was acquitted of all of these serious charges, right?
But he was just denied bail. He was denied bail again.
He was denied bail again, and I actually learned that on your segment yesterday afternoon as I was sort of doing my preparation for this. But we have to remember that one of the things that he got in trouble for, that Diddy got in trouble for in jail, was using other inmates' calling number. Remember that? So he was calling witnesses in the case from jail using other inmates. That was a direct affront to that judge. That was remember, we had all those attempts at bail that were denied at the very beginning of the case, one after another. This judge, and it's the same judge who's going to sentence him, denied that over and over again. And you and I, again, in another conversation we had on your show, we both said he is screwed now, that he's got no chance because he's violating the rules of the court while in jail. So if he's disobeying the rules of the jail and the directive of the court while he's in custody, how can you be expected to actually follow the terms of a bail agreement when he's out of custody? Right. And I think that chicken is coming home to roost again. I mean, I think that's what happened yesterday afternoon.
Diddy was up, partway out of his seat, fire in his eyes. His lawyer leaned close, speaking low, trying to pull him back. But Diddy wasn't hearing it. They want to bury me. They've been trying for years, and now you're letting them. A bailiff reached out, hand on his shoulder. Diddy snapped his head around. Don't touch me. Boom! Another gavel slam. The judge tried to speak, but Diddy kept going. This ain't justice. This is a setup. That was it. The tension finally blew. Two bailiffs moved in, gripping each arm. Diddy planted his feet, fought it, but they started walking him out. Even then, he twisted back, shouting, "This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't over." The heavy door closed behind him. His voice cut off, and the room finally breathed. The judge sat tall, face calm, but the air was thick with everything that just happened. One soft gavel tap followed. He spoke again, but no one really heard.
5 years, the White Slave Traffic Act has been limited to defendants who cause interstate travel for financial gain through the business of prostitution. That Sean Combs remains in jail for being convicted of being a customer of consensual adult sex services makes this case truly exceptional. Not only is prosecuting the users of adult prostitution services inconsistent with the Mann Act, it's inconsistent with the prosecution policies of the district attorneys of Manhattan and the city attorney of Los Angeles, California, 2 of the 3 locations where this prostitution allegedly took place. In addition, Mr. Combs is incarcerated while everyone else involved in this identical conduct, his girlfriends, the cowboys, the agency leaders, the porn stars, and others, walk free, as they should. If there was ever a fact pattern that was exceptional under the Mann Act, it is this one. And then they move on to another argument, that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, has usually only charged Mann Act violations when there's financial gain. And they even cite a number of cases in the Southern District of New York, where Combs was prosecuted, that apparently involved defendants that set up a prostitution business for profit. Again, trying to distinguish between Combs' conduct and these cases. He never did any of this for profit, they argued. And they even cite the 1953 U.S. Attorney's Manual that says, quote, as a general rule, prosecution should not be instituted in the so-called non-commercial cases. And they claim the Department of Justice manual today, quote, makes clear that the prosecution of customers involved in an 18 U.S.C. 2421 offense, like Mr. Combs here, is now limited to prosecuting those who engage in commercial sex with victims of sex trafficking, in addition to those who otherwise perpetrate or facilitate human trafficking offenses. And in the absence of any sex trafficking charge, however, it is clear that the standalone Mann Act counts never would have been prosecuted.
What they saw, no one would forget. Reporters flew out the door, phones to their ears, shouting the story as it happened. Camera guys rushed, trying to catch the hallway shot. Inside, the gallery buzzed. Disbelief, rumors, wild talk spreading fast. Outside, the crowd got thick. People who'd missed it pushed forward, phones out, waiting to catch something, anything. Then, it happened. The side door opened. Diddy came out with the bailiffs, and the crowd erupted. Cameras flashing, reporters yelling questions, noise everywhere. Diddy didn't look up at first, just walked, jaw tight. But then, for one moment, he glanced up. That look, full of heat, full of fight. The van door slammed, the engine kicked up. In seconds, he was gone. But outside, the chaos still burned. The storm wasn't over, not even close.
51 to 63 months. Now, this is before a pre-sentencing investigation and report. Now, the defense, right, they want 21 months. He's already served almost 10. Talk to us about what you're thinking here, because there is no minimum. The maximum's 10. If the judge were to combine it together, like you said, 20 years, feels highly unlikely that would happen. As we're talking, what is a pre-sentencing report investigation? How would it affect this? What do you think the judge is going to do? There's so many different factors to consider here, and it's not like a murder case when it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. It's like life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a given. There's room here. What do you think the judge is going to do?
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation, where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time. And that's something that federal judges traditionally really adhere to. They tend to put a lot of weight on those, far more than they do in state court. The probation department can make a recommendation, but the DA will certainly have more ability, most of the time, to talk a judge in or out of a sentencing recommendation from the probation department. Federal court is different. They really put a lot of weight on those. So that's something that I think is going to be very interesting. And a lot of that will come down to what the individuals involved in that investigation, even though it shouldn't impact their professional recommendation. It's really, I think we're going to see what they thought of the case. Did they think he got away with something horrific here? Did they think that he was getting railroaded from the beginning? I think that may reflect in the recommendation to the court, but of course we don't know what that is yet. I don't know. If I'm his defense lawyer, I don't know if I am pressing the gas on that, trying to make this thing go faster. I mean, it's coming up soon enough anyway. I would want to give them the time and not press them, because you don't want a probation officer or anybody in the federal system to feel like they're being rushed.
Right.
Because I think it's very easy to just go, okay, screw it, the guy should stay in.
The second it ended, the whole world lit up. News stations cut in. Social media went crazy. Every angle from inside that courtroom slowed down, zoomed in, picked apart. Industry folks started talking. Some dropped hints about old drama. Others said it was wrong, that the system failed him. The noise kept growing. Everyone wanted in. Back inside, a clerk gathered the mess left behind. Papers scattered. A pen still on the floor. Diddy's space at the table looked bigger now. Like it used to hold everything together. The judge's bench sat quiet. The echo of that last gavel hit still hanging in the air. The trial was over, but the real story? Diddy slamming his hand, shouting, getting dragged out. Experts debated every blink, every word. Was it rage or a man pushed too far? His legal team was grinding, writing statements, calling media friends, but none of that mattered. That moment was locked in, because now it wasn't just about what happened.